Hi there, my name is Cynthia Veronica, and welcome to another story time. So grab your tea or your coffee and let's get right into it. So I have a 3-year-old daughter named Samantha and a 5-year-old son named Sebastian who has, say it with me, achondroplasia, the most common form of dwarfism. So in this story time, I want to talk to you about ableism. Ableism. What is ableism? Ableism is the discrimination or social prejudice against a person with disabilities. It's sort of like racism, except towards people with disabilities. So if you are a person with a disability or a parent to a child with a disability, you may be able to recognize when it's happening. And you also might realize that it's not always obvious. Sometimes it's very subtle. For me, it wasn't until I started talking to certain people and realizing what ableism is that something in me clicked and I started realizing, oh my gosh, I've actually experienced ableism a time or two in my life as well with my son. So Sebastian has dwarfism, as I mentioned before. And after my 5-month maternity leave was up, I ended up going back to work. So I had actually told several people at work that Sebastian had dwarfism, but not everyone at my work knew. So when I went back to work, there was one particular gentleman, I think he was probably in his 60s at the time, and he and I started chatting and he started asking me questions about Sebastian. And I just basically was telling him, oh, it's great, it's going great, and I'm really enjoying being a new mom. And at one point during the conversation, he says to me, oh, before you know it, he's gonna be taller than you. And I actually kind of chuckled and said, oh, probably not because my son has dwarfism. And I remember he just kind of looked a little grim and he turned away from me. He turned to look at his computer screen and he just said, oh, Cynthia, I'm so sorry. And I was kind of taken aback by that. I didn't expect that reaction, especially since I told him in a sort of matter-of-fact way, the same way that I would say, oh, I'm having a pizza for lunch. And I remember I just kind of replied with, oh, it's okay. And I kind of just turned around and walked away. And, I was just really bothered by it. And I couldn't really pinpoint why, but, it wasn't until later that I really reflected on it that I realized why it bothered me so much. Also, I want to point out that I was surprised that he was saying, I'm sorry, because this gentleman also himself had a son who had a severe learning disability, and his son had to go to a specific school and had to get specific therapies. And so, I was kind of surprised that he was responding to me that way, and just a little taken aback. It was just a little harder for me to process. So like I said, ableism can be very subtle at times, and it can also be very confusing. So with ableism, people with disabilities are considered to be less valuable to society. They are also considered to be inferior to those that are non-disabled. There is also the presumption that all people with disabilities want to be cured. So there's just a lot of aspects of ableism. Oh, and by the way, this wasn't the first time that I got an I'm sorry as a response when telling someone that my son has dwarfism. But it was just definitely something that made me feel off. So having reflected on this situation as well as other situations, as much as I have by now, I've come to realize why this response, I'm sorry, has bothered me. And I realize that when I think of ableism in the same way that I think of racism, I can understand why this would bother me. So my kids are also part American Indian. And so it would be similar to someone saying to me, I'm so sorry that your children are part American Indian, or I'm so sorry that your child has darker skin. I would be really bothered by that. And in the same way, I am bothered when someone says to me, I'm sorry your son has dwarfism. So here's how I think I should have replied. Well, I'm not sorry, and I think Sebastian is perfect. And do you know why? Because having a disability or a difference is not something that is inherently bad or sad. And yes, there are certain situations that are very heartbreaking. There are people that are in constant pain due to their disability. But we cannot pigeonhole disability as being this one thing. There are so many different experiences. Yes, Sebastian may have some medical things to deal with as a result of his dwarfism, but we are going to deal with it in the most positive way possible. And you know what? Sebastian is living a really good life right now. Yes, even in his babyhood, he is living the best life possible. And he will continue to do so. You know why? Because he will be raised in a household that is so incredibly loving and so incredibly supportive of him. Sebastian is free to do whatever he wants. And you know what? He's going to have so many opportunities in front of him. And what I want for my kids is for them to be good, kind, honest, loving, and respectful human beings. And if Sebastian grows up to be a man of character, then I know that I've done my job as a parent and that I've done it right. And you know what? I bet you Sebastian can do something that you can't do. Sebastian is double jointed as a result of his dwarfism. So he can actually go from a sitting position to an upright standing position without even using his hands or bending his knees. And it's almost like a Houdini magic trick. So that's what I think I should have said instead, or something to that nature. I think the more people start to realize that living with a disability or a difference is not something that's intrinsically bad or sad, and that there can actually be so much love and joy and community building for it, the more people realize that, the more beautiful a world we will live in. And it's absolutely transformational once we're able to see it in this different light as a society. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.